Thank you, Anna, for that. So I'm just going to talk about the team's insights. So I'm Sherrylynne Babolcsay, and I'm the senior lecturer and course leader on our programme at UCLAN. So I'm just going to whiz through, if you want to move the slide on, Anna. So talk about how we kind of designed and how we actually implement that case-based learning that we decided to use going forward. So we didn't want to sort of throw out all the other methods of teaching and learning that you can use. So we do incorporate all those and build upon those approaches. So we use elements of definition-based learning, but we try to make it, because it's not black and white, is it? And it's obstetrics and midwifery and maternity and practice in a clinical setting is very sort of, I know that Anna said it earlier on today, we were chatting, that it's dancing through the greyness. And I use that term quite a lot with my students, that it's always grey, it's never quite black and white. And we do want them to have solve problems and come up with solutions and find solutions to problems, but we didn't want the problems to be the focus of the learning and the focus of where they were, what they were using to build on. So they use some of that in some of the elements, but we don't use it as the whole main base. It's kind of interwoven with the case-based learning. So what we decided to do was we still had to have modules from a university perspective. So what we did was we came up with sort of the three core main elements of the midwife in both her setting with working with women and families and how she would practice autonomously, how does that sit in a professional setting and in her professional role, and then how does that sit in a multidisciplinary team in that collaborative working, and how is that defined. We then focused on the woman and the childbearing journey and what impacts on that from all angles, but also then thinking about the baby and the family and how that intertwines. So rather than teaching in an old sort of modular based setting where you would do separate modules that then would sort of all come together at the end when you qualify, what we do is we teach all of those modules interwoven together. So all those elements form part of each case that we use. And then to help the student to break down those cases and to have kind of focal areas that they need to concentrate on, we use sub-themes. And so we've got these 6 sub-themes of anatomy and physiology applied to midwifery, thinking about the ethics and law and professionalism, how do politics and policies and public health intertwine in that, where's the cultural sensitivity in that care, what's the evidence base and what's the theory and the research, what's currently going on in practice and how does that link, and then thinking about those transferable skills that the students have. So as Anna's already talked about, she talked about the curriculum and using the underpinning philosophy of salutagenesis. So that is interwoven into every case, and every student sort of always talks about that element, and particularly linking that to not only when we're talking about facilitating sort of normality and physiology, but how that impacts on the complexity and the complex nature, and how can we still have that salutogenic approach even when women are, in a more kind of pathogenic kind of pathway. We then link that into our cases and we introduce our case-based learning. We need to make sure that our students feel prepared and that we introduce those themes to them. And those themes sit in every case that we do as we run through, and then they have the actual case themselves. So we break this down as a team. How do we manage that? So we still have module leaders who focus on sort of the assessment strategy and meeting specific learning outcomes that are aligned to those modules, and thinking about the content of the timetable and how it's structured. But what we will then have is sort of session leads. So how we sort of structure it roughly is that we use different cases kind of per week or so many sets of teaching days. So they have a case launched, and then they have some theoretical elements, and then they have some time to work on it, and then they come back and sort of review that case and feedback the information that they've gathered. So that's done by the session lead who sets that up, so that they will develop some of the resources and the package and align the case. And so they'll populate the frameworks that we use for the cases. They'll organise the facilitators, that are going to facilitate those feedback sessions, and they'll sort of launch the case and lead that sort of collaborative working with the groups of students, and lead those reflective sessions that the students do throughout the week. And then we'll have facilitators that will then think about the actual session, look at the themes and the core learning elements that were set for the case, ensure that the group meets the specific learning outcomes that were set for that particular case. And they'll also contribute to that setting. And how we always set it out with the students is, we're in an equal partnership here, we're all learning together. Quite often they'll go away and they'll find something I haven't come across, or I didn't know, or I hadn't just read, and they can share that with me and I'll learn something, and then I can add in, well, I think you could have gone down this way, or you could have looked at that, and we'll do that as we go along. And what we also then found as we've moved along through the programme, that actually having cohort leads or sort of year leads was really helpful to kind of organise all of that. So they would take ownership of making sure that the whole programme knitted together, because we're teaching all those modules all together at the same time, using the cases as the underpinning. So this is sort of how we came about it. We teach the whole curriculum, and in order to get there, we use a blended learning approach. We use our cases that the students will go away and do and work in small groups, but we also then interweave those elements of some of the traditional, where they do need to have a lecture or some core activities or workshops, or that might include skills as well. So that will include clinical skills that might align with the particular topics or the particular case that week. And we'll also interweave, it's had sort of a bit of a transition of being called different things. So we started off with Journal Club, then it became Research Club, and it's become Evidence Club, and it will be Evidence Club moving forward in our new curriculum as we move forward. So the students are split down into small groups to work together, and then they feed back to the other groups their particular elements. So this is just a little bit of a wheel and a cycle to show you how it goes. So they either have a new or an ongoing case. So in first year in particular, they'll sort of follow the same family through the whole of the childbirth continuum, in order to make sure that they're getting a really good grounding on all the sort of normal physiological processes. In year two, we tend to move into different cases each week, different families, different complexities and things that we would align with it. And then in sort of year three, we utilise the women they're case holding. That's how it sort of sits at the moment. So they'll have these core learning sessions, as I've said, along with that they'll then utilise some of that, as well as going away and doing their own research. They'll then work individually on their section, but they'll be working as part of a whole group together. And then they will then do this feedback where we all share their learning together, and they will be given feedback both from their peers that they're presenting to or sharing their learning with, and from us as facilitators. So the main purpose of this is that we understand what we're setting the students to do is quite high challenge. We want to challenge them. We want them to learn new skills. We want them to start learning how to present, how to put presentation together, how to use some interactive technology, how to design a quiz, how to present online, how to use a Prezi. All those skills, how to research and where to find good quality evidence and how to utilise that in an interesting way. But we also want them to feel really well supported. We don't want them to feel that we've sent them off and abandoned them on their own. So they are quite well supported by us from a pastoral perspective, where we meet with them. And we did pre-COVID do kind of team chats on their directed study days to check where they're at. Are we okay? Is anybody struggling with a particular point or finding some particular evidence? But we also structure the format of the case that we give. We align links to current evidence or the big pieces of evidence, or we think you really need to look here, or you really need to look at this, and this is something that we think you should be reading, so that they feel really well supported. But ultimately the outcome is that we have critical thinkers who are able to think critically, to think outside the box, to question why are we doing things, how does that apply, and ultimately bridge that theory practice gap, because they're constantly then linking what they're doing in practice, what they see in practice, seeing women as a whole, to some of those theoretical elements that would potentially previously have been taught separately. So this is just a little snapshot of things that students have done over the years, and I've got loads of them. But what they do is they come up with the most amazing and creative ways and ways to share that knowledge and information with each other and to learn collectively together that I would never have thought of even. We've had cakes to demonstrate the anatomy of the placenta. We've had games, we've had quizzes, I've had full whole game shows. They get very involved. They set them up in teams. We have prizes, we're learning, we have quizzes. But we might also have presentations. We might have a post presentation. They'll design leaflets. They do things online as well. They'll present online, or they'll do some acting or something creative. And it's just really exciting to see what they can come up with. And I think crucially, one of the things we do is we give facilitator feedback on a weekly basis almost, which is quite unusual because ordinarily you'd probably only get feedback as a student once you've submitted in a summative assignment, or even maybe a little formative one in between, but much more spaced out, whereas they're constantly getting feedback from where they're at, how they've worked in the group, how they've done with their presenting, they picked up a new skill, have they moved on from where they were last time it was their turn to present and done something new, they've tried something new, you've tried Prezi, but also thinking about the content of what they've delivered, and they can then utilise that as part of their sort of portfolio gathering and their own kind of personal development and learning. So moving forward into where we're going with our new curriculum, the Lancet series came out, which we felt very much when it did come out that it actually aligned with what we were already doing, because this is how we were teaching our curriculum. And we were really excited when this became the underpinning of the new future standards, because it just reaffirmed that we were right to be doing what we're doing, and this is how we align our teaching. So moving forward into our new curriculum that we've just written, that will hopefully get validated soon, is that we want to sort of strengthen that practice and that continuity of care and carer, and that will run through our whole programme, whereas previously what we currently do is it sits kind of in the final year as a sort of bit of a standalone element, whereas what we want to do moving forward is that is threaded through the entire programme, so that students begin that right from year one, and it's kind of that thread that entwines through the whole of our curriculum. And so then we've used the new future standards and domains to as those themes that we had before, where we had 3 module themes. We're now utilising those 6 domains from the new future standards, but also those are the sub themes as well. And I'll hand over to the lovely Sarah.
Thanks for watching this video from the Maternity and Midwifery Forum. For more expert opinion and analysis, hit the button below to subscribe.